Why the best performers often struggle to become great coaches.
The top performers are that little bit more talented. So they didn't, as athletes, as a high level athlete, we push through the pain levels that most people won't. And that transfers directly into business later on or into coaching. Being able to push through those times and see the kids and see the athletes as to how far you need to push and when you need to pull back.
How did that skull fracture, because that was happening.
His partner when he hit a rut, fell backwards and slammed his head against the ice.
Usually 15 months before your first Olympics. And that happened on the ice as well, didn't it?
That was only 2 weeks before we were supposed to compete over in Moscow. That's the whole story. My coach asking the doctor if I was able to get back on the ice soon. And the doctor's like, we've got to see if he makes it tonight first. Scott Hamilton, Olympic champion. Christiane Maguchi, Olympic champion. Gordy Evergreenkov, Olympic champion. I'm out there helping these people who've already achieved everything you can in the sport as far as the gold medal.
Be somebody who's thinking about getting into coaching. What's maybe a self-audit they could do on themselves to realize, is this really the right thing for me?
Checklist for deciding if you want to get into coaching is number one.
Welcome to Breaking the Chain, brought to you by Impel Talent. I'm Nathaniel Chapman.
And I'm Taryn Shabrat.
Welcome back to Breaking the Chain. This week, I'm so excited to invite on the podcast an old friend, but actually a very much esteemed Olympian, former Canadian national pairs champion, an elite performer, coach, performance director, and now business owner, whose career spans sports, entertainment, and leadership. Doug brings a unique vantage point on what it takes to build high-performing teams, transitioning from athlete to leader, and the role of creativity and culture within the coaching world. I have to admit, my journey with Doug was a little different, as I met him playing rugby with the Scottsdale Blues in Phoenix. But I'd love everyone in our network in welcoming Doug. Welcome to the podcast.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Nate. It's great to see you. Great to be on.
It seems funny to have just connected with you because I think you popped up on my LinkedIn for some reason. And I was like, I forgot everything that we've known. I mean, 15 years ago, I think we met, or almost 20 years ago.
Oh, more. Yeah. It's got to be 20. Yeah.
But it's crazy the way you can connect with people now. And I'm so glad when we had the last conversation and we were preparing for this episode, because today what I really want to hone in on is why the best performers often struggle to become great coaches. So we recently did an episode with Simon Thomas around why your top performers don't become great managers. So from a business environment perspective, and I'm very happy to now nurture that with a bit more of a focus on how that can also not work or align in the sporting world. When I say that to you, what's maybe your first impression?
First impression is it's very true, and I've seen it firsthand myself. I believe that some of the top performers, the top athletes, they're so in tune with what they're doing. They're focused on themselves 100% of the time, that the transition to coaching is difficult because it's no longer our life. It's no longer our performance. We are now giving ourselves to someone else, giving our knowledge to someone else. And that's a difficult thing to turn that switch. And there are also times when the top performers are that little bit more talented. So they didn't necessarily, not that they didn't have to work harder, they didn't have to work so precisely at times. They're able to get away with some things that the regular person or the regular athlete, for that matter, can't get away with.
It's interesting you say that, because I think there's levels of like different pieces of setbacks that, whether or not it came from hard work or talent or differences, if you've been in a position where you've gone through more regular setbacks or more challenges, and we actually discussed this a little bit on one of our previous podcasts about when you have to take on in team sports other roles because the star performer is outshining other players. So you realize, yes, that's important, but there are other roles I need to pick up for the better of the team rather than maybe the glory hunter or the top performer in a role. So I think that's why this topic's going to be really interesting, because I think we want to really isolate what makes someone go from being a top athlete to coaching others to reach their peak. But maybe let's back up a little bit, because I'd love to talk around your competitive career. Obviously, I gave you a little quick intro, but you went through an Olympic experience. I remember when we were discussing the episode, you actually almost came out of skating, came back into skating, and that led to work that went through to national and international success. I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey, and maybe what are some of the mindsets or habits or pieces, the discipline that allowed you to step up and become a high performer in your sport?
Right. Well, as a young kid, I just followed my brother into figure skating. He wanted to play hockey, and the small town we lived in Canada, you had to take skating lessons first. So he started in skating lessons, and I was 3, almost 4 years old. And I guess my mom just finally checked me on the ice and said, "Yeah, get out of my hair, go skate." And that's where I landed. A few years later, my mom and I moved to Vancouver and I started training with higher level coaches, and I was pretty talented as a kid. So it was easy. But then I hit teenage years, and that's when things were starting to be a struggle. And I think that's where I could have either just quit the whole thing, or what actually ended up happening is once I graduated high school, from the egging on of my high school English teacher, I kept going in the sport, and I moved away from home, started training at a high-end training center in Ontario, and that's where I really learned about work. I had never worked that hard in my life, about the hours needed to be put in, the training level that we had to get in at. And within, 82, I moved there. So by 88, I was going to my first Olympics. And that was just mind-blowing. I think about it a lot, that I started my life born to a logger, fisherman, and a baker, and lived in a logging camp for a bit, sleeping in a drawer, ending up at the Olympics was pretty crazy. But I know that I just recently, I started to think about something. So I'm going through some medical problems, and I kept thinking, oh, I keep hitting these highs and then get dropped down. I'm flipping the script on this, because a lot of times I believe that I wasn't dropping down. I was actually moving up. I'd have a starting point low, move my way back up. And that was the whole thing about just after high school. I was at the lowest low of the sport of figure skating. I'd actually played rugby in high school for 5 years. Loved it. That's my favorite sport of all. Way more than figure skating. I love watching it. I love playing it still. But I was ready to quit skating, and that was the low, but that was the low starting point as opposed to the low ending point.
It's interesting that I think having some of those pieces where you get a chance to reflect and you've gone through like rough patches also are really meaningful, because I think there's a lot of times where people quit. There's I was saying from a high performance point of view, a lot of that perseverance and that resilience is the same that we talk about with like business owners or entrepreneurs, where you say like, actually a lot of it is just being able to put up with the pain for longer than most people, right? Like actually success does come. It's just whether you believe in it long enough to keep going and pushing and showing up every day. And sometimes it does mean, taking a break or having to think about whether this was for you or not. And maybe that break back then was at the right time, to give you a bit of space, because I know what it can be like in those sort of environments. It's high pressure and heavy, and you might have fallen out of love with it, and might also be why you get into, although rugby is an amazing sport, so I know why, but might be why you leaned on something that probably was less pressure and more around camaraderie.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know the same thing, Nate, that as athletes, as a high level athlete, we push through the pain levels that most people won't. And that transfers directly into business later on, or into coaching, being able to push through those times and see the kids and see the athletes as to how far you need to push and when you need to pull back. And I think that's one thing I learned a lot because of things like I had a skull fracture just 15 months before we made our first Olympics. The doctor didn't know if I was going to make it through the night. So there too, it's like, do I come back? Yeah, absolutely. I had no thoughts of quitting, but I had other people saying, well, maybe you should. So there's these little things that kept jabbing at me, but I kept coming back again. So like I said, that's why I'm flipping the script on everything, looking back on my life and going, that was a starting point. And I think I'm now coaching again as a consultant, still working in the real estate business, even though it's a tough business right now. And I'm believing that I can help them from a low starting point and help them rise up, help my contractors who've had problems lately finding work, get some more work and get things rolling. So a lot of times I look back and I can reflect on what has happened to me and how I can pass that knowledge on.
How did that skull fracture, because that was happening, you said 15 months before your first Olympics. I mean, and that happened on the ice as well, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it was a fluke accident where the ice was getting ruddy, like from grooves that you make with your blades. And I was lifting my partner, going up to get to this one hand lift really fast. And it was called the lasso lift. So, lassos go around. So that's the basis of the start of this lift. And as I got to the backward turn, my foot stuck in the ice and down we went. So I saved my partner. Her head hit my shoulder. My head hit the ice with a nice snap. Went to our team doctor, and he just strapped me into strapped my neck down and head down and took me down to the hospital and found out I had a double skull fracture. So that was only 2 weeks before we were supposed to compete over in Moscow. And
Wow.
that's the whole story with my coach asking the doctor if I was able to get back on the ice soon. And the doctor's like, we got to see if he makes it through the night first. That was the first time that I looked and listened to the doctors 100%. This was a little bit more serious than like a sprained ankle or whatever. But I learned about the slow process coming back. I learned about limits. I learned about accepting goals that were short-term goals, small goals, and only going with that. Not thinking, oh yeah, I did that, now I'm going to push further. Just the short-term goal of the first one was just skating around the ice with a hockey helmet on, not doing anything. Not jumping, not throwing, not lifting, not spinning, just skating. So back to square one. And as long as I was able to do that, check mark, goal achieved, goal accomplished. So that was a big thing about that. And it taught me a lot about recovery and goals and accepting whatever the goal is. That's it. If you made it, you made it.
We talk, I mean, it's interesting, like in the corporate world, we talk a lot about how when people are calm in bad situations, or sometimes you look to people in the room, right, who, especially in today's world, we're going through a VUCA world, right, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous.
Right.
It's a crazy place. And in corporate environments, people are being laid off, and there are huge challenges facing the modern employee today. And when you look, when there is announcements or change or, big issue or challenges, sometimes you see people in the room that are a little bit more calmer, or, and a lot of those people have been through things that I think have allowed you, you've been through really tough pieces. I used to say to people, sometimes it's like we all go through a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the same life pain at one point or another, whether you lose someone close to you, whether you go through a redundancy, whether, hopefully not another head injury. But because of those things, you build up leadership potential, because you realize, I can get through this. I can, it did take time, and I do have to, I love what you said, face what's in front of me and take it one step at a time, just progress one little bit. If I make progress every day, I was having a chat with my team this morning in the morning roundup, said, how have you bettered your team one step? Sometimes you can look at a day and be like, that was crazy, but have you made progress? Have you advanced your desk? So it's a crazy thing to have gone through, but I think a lot of those moments probably leaned into stuff that then you could take into your coaching or leadership journey.
Oh, absolutely. Like, think of how many very successful businessmen have been bankrupt once, twice, 3 times, totally bankrupt. To get down to that level and know that it's okay. Somehow it's okay. Just like I'm laying on the hospital bed, it's okay. I'm at this level. I'm just going to take the steps that leaning on people who are experts at recovery, leaning on people who are experts at recovering their business is one of the greatest things I learned from that experience. And then getting into coaching, I was able to lean on that too. And I'd see, like, we had some athletes when I first started consulting as a coach, when I was still performing on the professional show and the Stars on Ice show in North America. I would consult in the summertime. There were a couple of kids that had skull fractures, had head injuries, and I got leaned on a lot because everybody knew in Canada that I was the guy who had the hockey helmet on at the national championships and chucked it into the stands partway through the program because they had to be careful of the first couple elements. So I was able to give my experience a bit there and help them out and say, hey, I'm here. I'm still alive. I'm not laying on 6 feet under. And I was pretty successful after that. So there's some guidance there that I could give. And I know that's one of the things I learned is that find the people, or find somebody that can find you the person that's been through something that you're going through that is successful now, and you can learn so much from them.
Well, that's a level of like the right skills that you'd expect in a good coach anyway, right? Like that level of empathy and encouragement and allowing people to not take the easier route out especially after a skull fracture. Bless, like you said, I'm done. I think that it's not worth it for me, but to get back on the horse, keep going and push through. And you mentioned it. And if someone goes through a bankruptcy, you might go, oh, well, why would I want to put myself through it again? But sometimes by going through some of those really tougher experiences, it can even help build further resilience.
One of the things I also leaned on was thinking about somebody this is part of one of the interviews I did. I said, well, my family, my two oldest brothers and my dad were commercial fishermen. They also were loggers. My one brother, he was on a boat in the harbor that got blown up. He's still alive. My dad got up on the rocks many times, stranded, way far away from any other ships in the ocean, because they were 200 miles off the coast when they're doing their fishing trips. So I just leaned on that and said, it's a skull fracture. My family's been in life-threatening situations that are way worse than me sitting in a hospital getting cared for, as opposed to sitting on a rock on the side of an island somewhere, hoping that someone can find you.
You might just be from a tougher generation, Doug.
Maybe.
Let's explore this topic further than on exploring why top performers struggle to become great coaches. You said something to me which it really resonated, which was you're moving from self-performance, or you explained it a different way. So I don't want to take the words from your mouth, because you were saying there's a difference between when you're out there promoting yourself or you're encouraging self-performance than when somebody else owns the success. Maybe help us unpack that a little bit, because I think that was a really interesting comment when we spoke about it, but it definitely rings true of where can people disconnect themselves from stuff that they've driven so much for as a high performer to then let somebody else take the success, or not take the success, but share it's all about promoting them. Right?
The top athletes in the world, no matter what sport it is, there's a whole team of people helping them, coaching them, training them, physical, mental, rehab, etc. Planners. To fly over to Europe, I didn't book the flights. We had somebody do that from the association. Scheduling. We got told when to come and train. We got told when to be at the airport. We got told when to be at the competition, et cetera, et cetera. As a coach, nobody's telling you what to do. Nobody's helping you with the schedule. Nobody's setting up a massage therapy treatment after you finish your day. You have to do that yourself if you're sore and achy. Because we stay sore and achy. I'm still sore and achy. I got arthritis, etc. So there's a big change in that. That's just on the surface of what do I do now? Like professional athletes, especially from team sports, that's the biggest one where they're all told to get on the bus at X hour and their gear's already in the rink or the arena or the football stadium. They don't have to think about it. Now, as a coach, you've got all those things piled on your shoulders, and it's a big difference. And it is no longer your life, it's somebody else's life. It's not just the performance and the achievements, but it's their life that you are the mentor. And at times I've been just talking to someone the other day, some of the skaters that we used to train, my wife and I trained them together. They're in their 30s, some in their 40s, and some of them still call us mom and dad. So that's the level of commitment, the level of connection that we had with the athletes. And you'll find that a lot in a lot of sports, that there's that coach, there's that trainer, there's somebody there that you connected with, and you're connected with them for life. So it's not just, go do your stuff, oh thanks, bye. It's a bigger connection. I had to take kids shopping for clothes when the luggage doesn't show up. So there's another level of things to do as a coach. As an athlete, you don't have to do that. The other thing about I talked a bit about the athletes who are like that second tier, like I was, ranked top 6, top 5, top 4 in the world at times. Never a top 3. So it's that just out of the medals, just off the podium. And we tended to have those struggles like you're talking about, not quite hitting that top level, trying to make that top level, learning something that we're maybe not so good at. And I think those are the times when I learned how to coach something or teach something way better than I could do it, because I learned all these different ways of trying to do it. Now I've got a whole toolbox full of ideas and methods that I can teach somebody else and I can try with someone else. Whereas before sometimes I'll put it blank, just point blank. And I had some coaches who weren't very developed in their coaching. They were good at one thing, but not overall. They weren't. I had one coach who was excellent at ice dancing, but that's not what I did. I did pair skating and single skating. So I learned a lot from him for one thing, but it didn't help me in my whole life. It's just like having a defensive coach trying to teach you how to pass the ball properly, or a tackling coach trying to teach you how to kick the ball properly. So it's like, they're good, but maybe not the greatest.
So Doug, you were actually talking around the three coaches I think you'd had before. They were kind
Right.
of coaching you in different elements. Do you want to pick us up from there?
Yeah, I had a coach who was very high level on ice dancing, but that's not the discipline that I was in. I was a single skater, jumping, spinning, etc., and later on a pair skater. So he had a limit as to where he could take me with his coaching ability. And for someone to get to a high level on a certain discipline, you got to make sure you reach out and find the right people, the right coaches. And coaches like I was, or a friend of mine, friends of ours, Jenny Mino and Todd Sand here in the States, they were fairly high up, but not Olympic champions. And they, just like my wife and I, they learned about how much it takes to get up there, how many relationships you make with these athletes. That's not just on the ice, it's off the ice. It's mentoring them. It's being mom and dad to some of them at times. So it's a deeper level. It's a deeper commitment than what we had as an athlete. I wasn't committed to my coaches as much as I'm committed to my athletes. So I put it that way.
I love that though, because I do think obviously there's a joy from being a coach. I get to do some coaching here and there, but I do think the biggest bulk of joy comes from the people that are getting access to those coaches and support structures. And I think about this a lot with the junior coaches I had growing up playing rugby and sport. And I think of the dedication and the sacrifice they made because they love the sport or because they love giving back or coaching people. Like there is a quality there that is servant leadership. You definitely enjoy doing the coaching, but I think it's probably not enough if you didn't enjoy what the result of the input is for the people you get to impact. And I think there's that common trait. That's why you get a lot of coaches when you're growing up in the States that their parents coach for a year or two, right, while their kids play.
Right,
and then
exactly.
They give up coaching, right, because they don't really have that servant leadership. That it's really about filling a need so they can spend time with their kids. But I think you touched on something I really like, which is this. I think you need to learn to manage. I almost said delegates, not delegates, but your trainees or what would you call it? Someone you're coaching, your coachee, your player.
So, the athlete, the player,
the athlete.
You
have to manage their expectations, their personality, and the setbacks. And I think managing through the setbacks is one of the toughest things to do. And if you haven't experienced those things firsthand, how can you have the empathy? And you're also losing the immediate feedback reward loop that I think athletes thrive on, right? So the reward of the dopamine hit from being successful and all that hard work piece is probably very heavy, where probably the chemicals being released as a coach are very different, right? They're much more the oxytocin and serotonin, which is being more happy about you as a unit working better together. So there's probably a lot of neurochemistry to it combined with what are the things that actually give you joy. Mm-hmm. And if it is seeing people grow and develop, that is very different than what you might see from somebody who's used to being a top performer.
I have seen a lot of coaches, good friends, successful coaches. I'll include myself in that. We're very much involved in the athlete. We're very much committed to the athlete. So when they fail, a piece of our heart hurts. When they succeed, we're just overjoyed. Not for ourselves, for the athlete. As an athlete, when you win, when you perform at your best, I wasn't, or I don't think most of us are like, hey, coach, I'm so happy for you that I performed well. It's like, we want to please our coaches. Absolutely. We want to please our parents. We want to please the audience, no matter what sport. You see the rugby players with 40, 50,000 people in the stands. They like to perform well, and they like to hear that crowd go for them, or a hockey team, etc. So there's that little bit of difference there that as a coach, we're 100% involved in that performance. And our emotions go up and down with that performance, but it's all about for the athlete. It's not about for myself as a coach. There are some absolutely that are like, oh yeah, look at me. I'm such a great coach. Look what I've done. And it's all about me. But then I'd say 99% are the other way, are out there for the athlete.
But I agree, but I think it's because people want to play for coaches that you genuinely think they have your best interest in mind. I used the comparison in an episode a few weeks ago around, the difference approaching in American football coaching when I was at school versus my rugby coaches. And it was like two very distinct different styles. And the high school coaches I had were very keen on in American football winning the league, being the best
Right.
football coach. And they had
Right.
a leadership style that was like an unhappy parent that you had to continue proving yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
it wouldn't speak to you until you got accepted to Yale sort of
Mhm.
coaching style. So if I was hitting tackles, like you do one big hit or you have a big play, you get that small nugget
Check mark.
of
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. And that can work. It is horrible. I hated it.
Yeah.
And when I started doing a rugby coach with John Lockett, a great, amazing person,
Mhm.
if he ever listened to the proper, I really enjoyed playing for him as a coach. Or I could, and those were the things where he was doing all the extra stuff. And you were mentioning it, like the support and parenting and
Yep.
the stuff where you go, someone really cares. Yes, the success is important, but if that's not the primary piece, if it's best about just getting the best out of yourself and the team, inherently as a side effect, you want to win. It just comes from a
Right.
very
Oh, yeah.
different place.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I want to touch on that because I think this segues really well into your touring with Stars on Ice experience, because you got exposure there to performance direction. And that was lessons learned from mentoring and leading and shaping others with performances. And I'm sure, I know you had said you worked with some incredible talent who had won different awards at
Yes.
Olympics and stuff. So you got that experience of mentoring. How was that? And how was that personal journey for you?
Oh, it was another transition because my skating partner, her nickname's Tuffy. Tuffy and I here for the next year is to move on to the professional ranks back then because it was still amateur at the Olympics. And we got the opportunity after the Olympics to go onto the Stars on Ice tour as performers, mainly because of our connection with Sandra Bezic, who was the director, who became the director of Stars on Ice. She was our choreographer. We did something different. I wore jeans at the Olympics on the ice. That was the first skater to wear jeans in a program. And it was all set up for the next step. That lasted for about 4 years. But in the meantime, they saw that I was a leader. I was one of the ones who would step up during rehearsals to make sure we were doing things right and question a lot of, are we still doing things right? So about a year after Tuffy had to retire and we were no longer performing on the tour, I got asked to come back as a performance director, which also meant I would be there at the rehearsal time, the training time for all of the performers in the show who were Scott Hamilton, Olympic champion, Christy Yamaguchi, Olympic champion, Gordieva Grinkov, Olympic champion, just on and on. Torval and Dean, in England, Torval and Dean are like gods. They're king and queen, almost. And it was actually, Chris was one of the ones that said to the management, you should bring Doug on as a performance director. So I'm out there helping these people who have already achieved everything you can in the sport as far as the gold medal. But they're asking me for tips on what they're doing just to keep their performance level up, keep their ability to jump as high as it can, keep their performance in the show up as well. So that was interesting and humbling, but also very honoring that I was asked by these people who I had on pedestals asking me for help and assistance. So I had to also learn about the egos, about how to kind of swim my way through this at times, because I was posting notes after each show to ensure that the show's integrity was continued and kept. And once in a while, I ruffled some feathers. So that was a learning curve as well. It's like, okay, how much can you push and how much can you assist and how many times do they just want to be patted on the back? That's something I learned a lot of on those few years as a performance director with that tour. I likened it to when Mike Sullivan used to play for Phoenix Coyotes, and Mike got hired on as the coach of Pittsburgh Penguins, who had a superstar, all-star team with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, et cetera, Marc-Andre Fleury, and they won the Stanley Cup. And they said, well, that's easy when you got a team like that. And I'm like, no, it's not. He had to figure out how to work with those egos, how to work with that talent to make a team. And there's some of the other experts who said, yeah, that's a good coach. That's not just a lucky coach. That's a good coach. So
At Impel Talent, we've worked with thousands of people and teams. And one thing is clear. People don't fail because they lack ambition. They struggle because they don't have a safe, unbiased space to learn, reflect, and grow.
Most people are growing quietly, under pressure, and often alone. And they're asking themselves, how do I lead without losing myself? How do I guide others when I'm still figuring it out? How do I build confidence when everything feels overwhelming?
It's not that they don't care. It's that traditional leadership development isn't connected to real life. Leaders don't need more checklists. They need space to pause, think, and make sense of their experiences. Because when people feel supported and understood, clarity grows, confidence builds, and they show up more grounded and intentional.
That's why we built Impel Connect, a space for real leadership growth, real support, and real human connection. A platform that brings coaching, community, and development into one accessible place. Because growth shouldn't be exclusive. It should be available to anyone ready to invest in themselves.
So what are you waiting for? Join us at app.impeltalent.com. Webinars, workshops, coaching, and most importantly, community.
Impel Connect, genuine human connection in your pocket.
They said the same about, I think I brought it up on the previous thing on Netflix. They've got the Cowboys football documentary, and it was talking about
that too, yeah.
if you'd given me that team, I could have won.
No.
And you realize all the controversy that came up within that team because of those. And I really like what you said, because in coaching, it's funny, isn't it? Like I think you have to be able to take a step back, whether coaches or as a manager, and not respond to things the way you'd want to respond to something, right? Because the output, you're communicating something, feedback. You're trying to tailor change their behavior to increase performance. And sometimes I might be having real conversations around their attitude or behavior. Other times it's going, I know this is the reaction I'm going to receive. So even though in my heart I would like to respond this way, I need to tailor this message because I know how it'll get received by the other person.
Oh, yeah.
That level of empathy, I find, is not something that's so easy if you're used to someone being like, I show up every day, I do these reps, I've been successful. It's much more like do as I do, and I think there's a difference between knowing what to do and how to teach/lead others to do it.
I 100% agree with that. And I'd say too, once again, I was able to teach certain elements, certain skills that I wasn't good at because I had to learn more and more about them. I had to dive deeper into how to do it. So then I coached those better. The stuff that was easy for me, I haven't coached as well. And I learned something from a music prof when I was in college for a couple of years doing part-time music. And he said, the best teachers never stop learning. And I continue to remember that and follow that. And that's where I learned along the way. And you're saying about what I want to say. And at first, when I was coaching, when we moved to Scottsdale and started coaching full time, I just look at the athlete or the potential athlete and go, yeah, you're going to be okay. You're not going to make it. And a couple of times we had meetings and they'd have these dreams of Olympics. I'm going, you're 15 and you can barely do what most 8-year-olds are doing. So it's not going to happen. I learned from that. It's not the thing to say. And it's like, no, just hold back on that. Don't be so realistic at times. I don't like to fluff somebody up, but I also don't need to tear them down and say, yeah, it's not possible. And I'm learning that from my own son, who at age 15, having skated for a few months at age 4, and then once a year maybe since then, age 15, he says, I want to play hockey. He never played hockey in his life. I'm going, there's no way. Now he's playing D3 junior hockey in California, which compared to a lot of kids that he played with along the way, they've quit. The high school kids, they've quit. The AAA kids, they've quit. And so I'm learning from him because my wife and I went to each other going, there's no way he can do this. Nuh-uh. It's not possible. And he's just proving us wrong. So, and I learned there was a couple of skaters that proved me wrong too. I'm going, good. I'd rather be proven wrong in a positive fashion than me say, hey, you're going to make the Olympics, and then they don't even make it to the national championships. That's not so good. But
there's a balancing act, isn't it? Because
Oh, yeah.
you were just mentioning, there's like toxic optimism as well. So we talk
Yes.
around that So if you
Yes.
give people all this hope anyway, and you know they're not going to be successful, or there's going to be challenges, it's just as damaging than if you are negative. Like, you have to have a level of realism and I think that's what you were probably getting at it initially. But it's tailoring the message for how does someone receive that, or how can I get the most out of this person? I mean, I've sometimes heard feedback being used because someone knows that the way that person will respond is it'll motivate them. It's different people are motivated differently. Some people need more
Yes.
nurture versus stick. Others need more stick versus nurture. I remember getting some really tough feedback around when I was playing number 10 and in rugby, and someone saying like, you're just not physical enough. And I was like, and that was a chip
That
on my
hurts.
shoulder. I mean,
Yeah,
that
hurts.
ended up making me move from playing fly half to inside center. Like, it changed the
Ooh,
perspective
there
of
you
my
go.
whole rugby career, because I was like, yes, I am. And it put motivation. That next game, I was slamming in anybody I could do. So, that it was funny because at the time it was more of an FU, I can do this. But I remember after that game, my coach being like, say, you can do it. So and that's the difference, isn't it? We were chatting around the emotional intelligence, the patience, and the communication element. You have to be able to know what's going to push someone's buttons and what's going to get the most out of someone. You have to have the ability to have a level of patience, which is not inherently a skill set that a top performer has, because you just want to get things done.
Absolutely
You get
not.
in the gym.
Yeah.
The patience is like the fact that you don't have patience is a benefit, because that's the reason you're in the gym 6 hours a day. And, you want to be at the top very rapidly. Whereas a coach, because you don't have the impact to make someone do what you want them to do.
Exactly.
It's a lot of messages that you need to deliver, and then like wait, you like seed your sow, and then similarly, you can't do any of those things if you're not able to communicate effectively. In order to make sure that you are pushing the right buttons. And I think that's the difference between building trust and a performance culture.
Yeah.
Or how do you build, building both, really.
Yeah. The two things come to mind. One was a good friend of mine who he himself was in the Olympics and top 10 in the world. And he's now the top performance director for Skate Canada. And years back when we moved to Arizona from Toronto, we were at the Skate Canada International competition, and Mike says to me, what's the difference? What's the difference between the Canadians and the Americans? And I told him, every single kid that walks into the rink, steps on the field, whatever, they're going to the Olympics. They're going to the NHL. They're going to MLB. They're going to be in the NFL. Or more than that, they're going to be Super Bowl champions. Every single one. And I said, they're not all going to make it there, but they all think they will. So there's that drive, there's that self-confidence that Canadians don't have. I felt apologetic when my partner and I won the national title. Like, oh, yeah, it was good. Yeah, we're fine. Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks. Instead of, hey, yeah, we're national champions. Let's go. So there was that difference, I told him.
Yeah.
The other one was about, little challenges and stuff. When I moved to Scottsdale, sitting in the coach's locker room, and one of the coaches there says to me, why are you here? And I went, it's a brand new ice rink. It's nice, and the weather outside is pretty beautiful, and hey, and why not? And she goes, I've been here 25 years. Nothing's ever happened. Nothing ever will. And that was my challenge. Like I said, there's the chip on the shoulder. Yeah. Why am I here? I'm going to do something here. And so within a couple of years, we had kids competing in the national championships, and then a couple of years after that, international competitions. So, like, hey, something happened. But yeah, that little challenge helps.
I really enjoy all those, because I think there's you have to take different lessons that you've had with elite athletes or high pressure environments and see what the takeaways are for leaders and coaches in those scenarios. It's funny, the mentality, because it's important. We talk around cultural intelligence as a business when we do coaching and leadership development, but you touched on a piece of it. I won't open it up too much, or we'll go in a tangent in a different direction. But different cultures have different viewpoints to success. It's been something that entrepreneurs have struggled with, like entrepreneurs in the United States. A lot of people are very, quite proud to be entrepreneurs, and it's like the American dream, and it's a very positive outlook to you can do this, you can build this, can do attitude approach. Whereas in other cultures, Canadian, very similar in the UK or Europe, sometimes it's a little bit more of a negative perspective.
Yes.
But then, there is a level of like realism to those things as well, but sometimes they're just a bit more harsher messages. But knowing where someone comes from and understanding the environment that they've grown up in also can help ensure that you're giving someone what they need. Something that might come across as quite egotistical in one culture is very different to someone coming from something else. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's been terrific, Doug. I mean,
Mm.
what do you think? I mean, if you're looking at the lessons you've picked up throughout the way, and how would you apply, like if you were giving someone advice now of they may be a high performer, they may be somebody who's thinking about getting into coaching, what's maybe a self-audit they can do on themselves to realize, is this really the right thing for me, or is it something that they can pick up later in life?
I'd say a checklist for deciding if you want to get into coaching or get more into coaching is number one. Can you devote yourself to other people? Can you devote your time to other people? Can you ensure that your number one priority is somebody else? That would be the number one thing. And secondly, it's you don't know it all. If you want to become a coach, you don't know it all. You need to keep learning, regardless of what you think, what level you've been to. You could be the best athlete in the world, a World Cup champion, but you might not know it all because you had your niche that you did, and you might be coaching somebody that needs something else. So second thing is that no matter what level of an athlete you've been, you don't know it all. And you can learn from anybody at whatever level they are. I've learned from an 8-year-old girl on how to skate better. And I was already coaching for 15 years at that time and having been to 2 Olympics. So you can learn from anybody, and you want to keep learning regardless. So if you can do that, then you're in the right mindset. So basic things.
But you've touched on the lack of ego there again. I mean, I hate to keep saying that, but I think there's a level of being able to be somebody who thinks that they can pick something up. When I was 8 years old, an Olympic champion is, or an Olympian or whatever, someone being able to be in the headspace to do that means you have to be quite open-minded to challenging the way you think and pieces. And I think the recap really here is elite performers doesn't automatically make for a great coach. The setbacks and failures can be the best teachers for leadership. And I say this to people all the time because I love the quote, "This too shall pass." And it's a quote by it's not a quote by what is the actor from
Tom Hanks. Yeah.
Castaway?
Yeah.
Tom Hanks. He said this quote, and I love it because it's one of these things like good times, bad times, they'll pass. Remain humble, press on through tough times because it will go through it. But if you can get through those failures and setbacks, you can treat them as incredible growth moments. And actually, as a coach, you can help people further understand why that failure or setback, you learn more from those things than anything else. And as a coach, it has to be around building the right mindset, being able to communicate effectively with your team, and adaptability. But on a lasting note,
I was going to say there's obviously been some great athletes who've become great coaches, but that's not the majority. And the majority are those who have good experience, high experience in a sport, and then transfer that plus all their experiences into coaching and being able to be the one that's not the star. That's the big thing. Yeah, I have an ego. I'd like to be the best coach in the world, but I'm going to learn from whomever I can to become that best coach in the world.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it. I mean, we talked about, I think when we met last time, the Wayne Gretzky and the challenges of becoming, the great one in the NHL and that tough transition to leadership. And there are other examples from Diego Maradona, Michael Jordan, Wayne Rooney, I was just thinking the other day of him starting to manage Derby County and become the coach at DC United, but those haven't translated immediately
those
into
athletes,
successes. So it is interesting. You're right. You can't paint everyone with a brush, but those athletes are probably going to be in a tougher position to adapt to that kind of role.
I'd say, and I heard this from a top NHL player, that being someone like a Wayne Gretzky is a job in itself. And that's the big thing, is that it's too hard. It's too hard. He can't walk down the street in Canada without being mobbed. So it's just a job in itself. And that's the same for any of the top elite athletes of any sport.
Absolutely. So Doug, last thing I'll ask you, this has been an amazing podcast. I so appreciate you coming on. We've had a bit of technical difficulties, but we've battled through them together.
It works, yeah.
I love asking everyone this at the end of the show to say, like, what is one thing that you wish you could have told a young Coach Doug? Given all the experience you've had today, is there a piece of advice that you'd have said, I wish I had known this at the beginning, and it's something that maybe some of our future leaders and future coaches could take under their wing?
What I would say to my younger self as a coach is to be a little more patient with yourself. Take some time to make things set up, because when we got to Arizona and all of a sudden one of the coaches had to leave and dropped 12 athletes on me, I was sprinting, and I don't think I've stopped sprinting. I've tried to, but I think take some time. There's always going to be tomorrow for those kids as well as yourself.
I love that as a piece of advice. And I think that's something that many leaders can take on board, because I think sometimes we expect too much too soon, especially as a new leader or as a new coach. So be kind to yourself, be patient. Yeah. This is stuff that you can learn and grow. And I think as long as you've got an open mind to that, again, it'll come. Don't quit on yourself, have that patience to fall into it. Love that, Doug. But thank you so much for coming on the show, Doug. We'll have to have you on again. If you are interested in being part of on our podcast moving forward, please email us at info@impeltalent.com. We are also interested in hearing from you. So we are getting some amazing guests on, but we also are keen for questions or anything you would like to contribute to the podcast. But we want to thank you again for being a listener and part of the Impel Network. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining us for our latest episode of Breaking the Chain. If you'd like to see more episodes, you can check us out online at www.impeltalent.com/podcast. And if you'd like to perhaps put a question into us or be featured on one of our next episodes, you can email us at info@impeltalent.com. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.